The black dress rustled against the wooden platform as Lydia Norton stepped off the train into the harsh Dakota Territory sunlight, her veil doing little to shield her swollen eyes from the brightness or the curious stares of Bismarck's residents who had gathered at the station that warm June afternoon in 1882. She clutched her worn carpet bag tighter, feeling the weight of grief pressing down on her shoulders like an invisible burden. The telegram in her reticule seemed to burn against her side, the one that had arrived 3 weeks ago informing her that her father had passed from pneumonia, leaving her alone in Philadelphia with nothing but debts and the dress she now wore. The same telegram had come just 2 days after she had mailed her acceptance letter to Franklin Hayes, a rancher in the Dakota Territory who had advertised for a wife. She had written to him immediately about her father's passing, explaining she would still come but needed time for a proper mourning period. His response had been brief but understanding, telling her to come when she was ready and that he would be waiting. Now, standing on this platform in a town that looked nothing like the brick and cobblestone streets of Philadelphia, Lydia wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The buildings here were mostly wooden, some still showing raw lumber that had not yet weathered. Dust hung in the air, and she could hear the distant sound of hammering and the occasional gunshot that made her flinch. "Miss Norton." A deep voice cut through her anxious thoughts. Lydia turned to see a tall man approaching, his hat in his hands revealing sun-streaked brown hair that fell just past his collar. He wore plain working clothes, denim trousers with a leather belt, a blue cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned forearms, and dusty boots that had clearly seen many miles. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features weathered by sun and wind, but what struck her most were his eyes. They were a clear gray color, and they held a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rough appearance. "Mr. Hayes." She managed, her voice hoarse from crying and the long train journey. "Yes, madam, I am real sorry for your loss." He did not move to take her hand or embrace her, seeming to understand that she needed space. "The wagon is just over here. It is about an hour's ride to the ranch." Lydia nodded, unable to trust her voice. She followed him to a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses, and he helped her up onto the bench seat before loading her bag and a small trunk into the back. She noticed he handled her belongings with care, as if they were precious cargo rather than the meager possessions of a desperate woman. As they rolled out of town, Franklin kept the horses at a steady pace. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but Lydia felt she should say something. "Thank you for allowing me to come despite my circumstances," she said quietly. "I know this is not what you expected." Franklin glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "Life rarely gives us what we expect, Miss Norton. I lost my own mother when I was 15. My father passed 2 years back. I understand grief is not something that follows a schedule or proper etiquette." Something in his tone made Lydia look at him more carefully. There was genuine understanding there, not just polite words. "How long did it take?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Before it did not hurt quite so much. It still hurts," Franklin admitted, his hands steady on the reins. "But the hurt changes, becomes something you carry different, like a stone in your pocket instead of a boulder on your back." He paused, seeming to consider his words. "My father always said that grief is just love with nowhere to go. You find new places to put that love, and the grief gets lighter." Tears welled in Lydia's eyes again, but these were different somehow. For the first time since her father had died, someone had said something that made sense, that did not feel like empty platitudes about God's plan or time healing all wounds. The landscape around them was unlike anything Lydia had seen before. Rolling grasslands stretched in every direction, broken occasionally by clusters of cottonwood trees or rocky outcroppings. The sky seemed impossibly large, a dome of blue that made her feel both insignificant and somehow part of something greater. In the distance, she could see dark shapes that Franklin told her were buffalo, though the great herds were not as numerous as they once were. "The ranch is not fancy," Franklin said as they crested a hill. Below them, Lydia could see a collection of buildings nestled in a valley near a winding creek. "But it is solid. The house has 3 bedrooms, a good kitchen, and a parlor. There is a bunkhouse for the hands, though right now it is just me and my foreman, Tom Crawford. He is a good man, been with the family since before I was born. He lives in a small cabin near the barn with his wife, Martha. She has been cooking for us, but she has been looking forward to having another woman around." Lydia studied the property as they approached. The house was a single-story structure made of logs with a covered porch across the front. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, and she could see curtains in the windows, a woman's touch that surprised her. The barn was large and well-maintained, and there was a corral where several horses stood swishing their tails against flies. Beyond that, she could see cattle dotting the hillsides, grazing peacefully. "It is lovely," she said, and meant it. There was something honest and real about the place, so different from the cramped boarding house room she had shared with her father in Philadelphia. An older woman emerged from the house as they pulled up, wiping her hands on her apron. She had silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, and a round, friendly face that creased with concern when she saw Lydia's black dress. "You poor dear," Martha Crawford said, coming forward to help Lydia down from the wagon. "Come inside. I have got tea ready, and you must be exhausted from your journey." Franklin carried Lydia's trunk and bag inside while Martha led her through the front door. The interior of the house was clean and surprisingly comfortable. The parlor held a settee and 2 chairs arranged around a stone fireplace, and there were shelves with books lining one wall. The kitchen was spacious, with a large table that could seat 8, and copper pots hanging from hooks above the cast iron stove. "I put you in the room at the end of the hall," Martha said gently. "Franklin is in the room opposite. The middle room is for guests or—" She trailed off, and Lydia understood what she meant. "For children if they came. You take all the time you need. There is no rush for anything." Franklin appeared in the doorway, his hat still in his hands. "I will be working around the property if you need anything. Martha will show you where everything is." After he left, Martha poured tea and set out fresh bread with butter and jam. Lydia realized she had not eaten since early morning, and despite her grief, her body demanded sustenance. They sat at the kitchen table, and Martha talked in a gentle, rambling way about the ranch, the neighbors, and life in Dakota Territory. "Franklin is a good man," Martha said, refilling Lydia's teacup. "Quiet but good. He has worked hard to keep this ranch going after his father died. Some of the other ranchers tried to push him out, said he was too young at 26 to manage a spread this size, but he proved them wrong. He is fair with his cattle, fair with his land, and he will be fair with you." "Did you know his mother?" Lydia asked. Martha's expression softened. "I did. Sarah Hayes was a fine woman. She came from Ohio, a mail-order bride herself. She and Franklin's father, Robert, they had a true love match. She could handle a rifle as well as any man, and she was not afraid of hard work. She taught Franklin to read and made sure he understood that being strong did not mean being hard." That night, Lydia lay in the comfortable bed in her new room, staring at the ceiling. She could hear the unfamiliar sounds of the prairie through the open window, crickets chirping, cattle lowing in the distance, the wind rustling through the grass. She felt hollowed out, empty except for the ache of missing her father. But underneath that, there was something else. a tiny seed of possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could build something here. The next morning, Lydia woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed in another black dress, one of only 3 she owned, and pinned up her dark hair. When she entered the kitchen, she found Martha already at the stove and Franklin sitting at the table with papers spread before him. He stood immediately when he saw her. "Good morning, Miss Norton. I hope you slept well." "As well as could be expected," Lydia replied honestly. "Please call me Lydia. Miss Norton seems too formal given our arrangement." "Then you should call me Franklin." He gestured to the chair. "Martha makes the best coffee in Dakota Territory." As Lydia sat, she noticed the papers on the table were covered in neat columns of numbers. "Ranch business?" she asked. "Cattle counts and expenses," Franklin confirmed. "Not the most exciting reading, but necessary. We have about 400 head right now, hoping to increase that by another 100 next year if the winter is not too harsh." "My father was a bookkeeper," Lydia said quietly. "Before he got sick, I helped him with his ledgers. I have a head for numbers." Franklin's eyebrows rose with interest. "That is a useful skill out here. Would you like to look at these?" I would welcome another set of eyes. Over breakfast, Lydia found herself studying Franklin's records. His handwriting was clear, and his calculations were correct, but she noticed he was paying a premium for grain from a supplier in town. "There is a mill about 20 miles west," she said tentatively. "I saw it mentioned in the newspaper on the train. They were advertising lower prices." Franklin leaned over to see what she was pointing at. "I did not know about them. That could save us a fair amount over the winter. Thank you." The small exchange felt significant somehow. She was contributing, being useful, rather than just being a burden or a charity case. Throughout the morning, as Martha showed her around the house and explained the routines, Lydia found herself watching Franklin through the window as he worked with the horses in the corral. He moved with easy confidence, his voice calm as he worked with a skittish mare, never raising his hand in anger or frustration. Later that afternoon, Lydia sat on the porch with mending that Martha had given her, something to keep her hands busy. Franklin came up the steps, pulling off his work gloves. "Would you like to see more of the ranch?" he asked. "I am riding out to check on the north pasture. It is a nice ride and you might enjoy getting out." Lydia hesitated. She had not been on a horse since she was a girl, and even then, it had been a gentle riding school pony. But the house suddenly felt too confining, and the thought of the open prairie called to something in her. "I would like that," she said. "Though I should warn you, I am not an experienced rider." "We will take it slow," Franklin promised. "I have a gentle mare named Buttercup that would suit you well." The mare was indeed gentle, a golden palomino with a sweet disposition. Franklin saddled her with care and helped Lydia mount, adjusting the stirrups to fit her legs. Then he swung up onto his own horse, a tall bay gelding, and they set out at a walk. The afternoon sun was warm but not oppressive, and a breeze kept the worst of the heat at bay. Franklin pointed out landmarks as they rode, explaining the boundaries of his property and showing her a spring that fed the creek running through the valley. "This land has been in my family for 12 years, he said. "My father came here with nothing but dreams and determination. He built everything from scratch." Franklin's voice carried both pride and sorrow. "I want to honor what he started, make it into something even better." "What made you decide to advertise for a wife?" Lydia asked, then worried the question was too forward. Franklin was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. "Loneliness, mostly, and practicality. Running a ranch is hard work, and it is harder alone. But more than that, I wanted someone to share this with, someone to talk to at the end of the day, someone to build a life with." He glanced at her. "What made you answer the advertisement?" Lydia considered her answer carefully. Desperation at first, if I am being honest. My father's illness took everything we had. After he died, I had nothing left. But when I read your letter, the way you described this place in your life, it sounded like you were offering more than just survival. It sounded like you were offering a chance at something real. I hope I can live up to that, Franklin said quietly. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Lydia felt some of the tension she had been carrying begin to ease. The vastness of the prairie no longer felt threatening, but rather freeing. There was room here to breathe, to be, without the suffocating weight of crowded streets and pitying glances. As they turned back toward the ranch, Franklin pointed to a rise in the distance. There is a spot up there where you can see for miles. Sunrise is something special from that vantage point. Maybe one morning when you are feeling up to it, we could ride up there. I would like that, Lydia said, and realized she meant it. Over the following days, a routine began to establish itself. Lydia helped Martha with the household tasks, finding comfort in the simple, repetitive work of cooking, cleaning, and mending. She took over managing the household accounts and quickly identified several areas where they could economize without sacrificing quality. Franklin seemed genuinely pleased with her contributions and began consulting her on other ranch decisions. But grief still caught her at unexpected moments. She would be kneading bread and suddenly remember her father's hands doing the same during the lean times when they could not afford a bakery. She would hear Franklin laugh at something Tom said and feel a stab of pain because her father would never laugh again. During these moments, she would slip away to her room or walk down by the creek, letting the tears come. Franklin never pressed her or told her to cheer up. Instead, he simply existed alongside her grief, acknowledging it without trying to fix it. One evening, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Lydia was sitting on the porch watching the sunset when he joined her, bringing 2 cups of coffee. "Martha told me today was your father's birthday," he said quietly, sitting in the chair beside her. Lydia felt tears well up again. She had not mentioned it to anyone, but somehow Martha had known. "He would have been 56. Tell me about him," Franklin said, "if you want to." And Lydia did. She told him about her father's love of music, how he would whistle while he worked, about his terrible jokes that made her groan even as she laughed, about how he had taught her to read using his ledger books, turning numbers into stories, about how he had held her mother's hand as she died, and how he had never remarried because he said his heart was taken. Franklin listened without interrupting, his presence solid and comforting. When she finally fell silent, he said, "He sounds like he was a good man. You were lucky to have each other." "I was," Lydia agreed, and for the first time she could think about her father without feeling like she was drowning. As June turned into July, the weather grew hotter, and the work on the ranch intensified. Lydia began to venture out more, helping where she could. She learned to gather eggs from the chickens without getting pecked, to churn butter, and to tend the vegetable garden that Martha had planted behind the house. Her hands, which had been soft from city living, began to develop calluses, and her skin took on a sun-kissed glow, despite her best efforts with bonnets. Franklin taught her to ride better, spending early mornings taking her on longer excursions around the property. She loved these rides, loved the freedom of galloping across open ground with the wind in her face. Franklin was a patient teacher, never making her feel foolish when she struggled with something. One morning in late July, they rode up to the rise Franklin had mentioned her first day. They reached the top just as the sun was breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The view was breathtaking. She could see the ranch buildings below, the winding creek, the cattle scattered across the grasslands, and beyond that, miles and miles of prairie stretching to the distant horizon. "This is why I stay," Franklin said quietly. "No matter how hard it gets, how brutal the winters or dry the summers, this makes it all worth it." Lydia understood. There was something profound about this place, something that spoke to a part of her she had not known existed. "I never knew the world could be so big," she whispered. Franklin turned to look at her, and something shifted in his expression. "Lydia, I know we have not known each other long, and I know you are still grieving, but I want you to know that I am glad you are here. You have brought life back to this place, to me." Lydia's heart began to beat faster. Over the past weeks, she had found herself noticing things about Franklin. The way he was always gentle with the animals, how he listened when people spoke, really listened. The rare but beautiful smile that transformed his face, the strength in his hands and the kindness in his eyes. "I am glad I am here too," she said softly. "When I first arrived, I felt like I was running away from my life, but now it feels like I am running toward something." Franklin reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. His grip was warm and solid, and Lydia felt something inside her chest unfurl like a flower opening to the sun. They stayed on the rise until the sun was fully up, hands linked, saying nothing because no words were needed. When they returned to the ranch, Martha took one look at them and smiled knowingly. That evening, Franklin asked Lydia if she would walk with him after supper. They strolled down to the creek, where willow trees provided shade and the water burbled over smooth stones. "Lydia," Franklin began, then stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "I know our arrangement was meant to be practical, a marriage of convenience, but I find I do not want that anymore." Lydia's breath caught. "What do you want?" Franklin turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I want a real marriage. I want to court you properly, let you know that my feelings are genuine. You have become so important to me these past weeks. Your smile, when it comes, lights up my whole day. Your laughter is the best sound I have ever heard. Your intelligence and strength amaze me. I am falling in love with you, and I hope that maybe, in time, you might come to care for me too." Tears filled Lydia's eyes, but they were not tears of grief. "Franklin, I already do care for you, more than I thought possible. When my father died, I thought I would never feel anything but sadness again. But you have shown me that there is still beauty in the world, still reasons to hope and dream. You have given me reasons to smile again." Franklin's face broke into a wide grin, and he pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. Lydia rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart, and felt truly safe for the first time since her father's death. "So we will do this right," Franklin said, pulling back to look at her face. "I will court you, we will take our time, and when you are ready, truly ready, we will have a proper wedding." "I would like that," Lydia agreed. The next weeks were the happiest Lydia had ever known. Franklin courted her with the same patient determination he brought to everything else. He picked wildflowers for her, leaving them on the kitchen table where she would find them in the morning. He taught her to fish in the creek, and they spent lazy Sunday afternoons with their lines in the water, talking about everything and nothing. He read to her in the evenings from the books in the parlor, his deep voice bringing the stories to life. But he also showed her the realities of ranch life. When a calf was born, he brought her to the barn to see it, explaining the process and the care the newborn would need. When he had to put down a horse that had broken its leg, he let her comfort him afterward, showing her that strength included acknowledging pain. Tom and Martha watched their growing relationship with approval. Tom, who had been taciturn at first, began to open up to Lydia, teaching her about cattle and sharing stories about Franklin's childhood. Martha became the mother figure Lydia had lost years ago, teaching her the skills she would need as a rancher's wife, and offering wisdom about marriage and life on the frontier. One August evening, as they sat on the porch watching stars appear in the darkening sky, Franklin said, "I want to show you something." He led her into the house and to his room, which Lydia had never entered. From a trunk at the foot of his bed, he pulled out a small wooden box, worn smooth with handling. "This was my mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold ring with a small sapphire. "My father gave it to her when they married. It is not fancy, but it meant the world to her. I would like you to have it if you will accept it." Lydia looked at the ring, touched by the trust he was showing her. "It is beautiful. Will you marry me, Lydia? Not because of an arrangement or practical necessity, but because I love you and cannot imagine my life without you." "Yes," Lydia said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." Franklin slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gentle and tender, a promise of all the kisses to come. They decided to marry in September, giving Lydia time to complete her period of mourning and for them to plan a small celebration. Word spread through the surrounding ranches and into Bismarck, and neighbors who Lydia had not yet met began to stop by to introduce themselves and offer congratulations. Lydia was surprised by the warmth of the community. She had expected frontier life to be isolating, but instead, she found a network of people who looked out for each other. There was Emma Richardson, whose ranch bordered theirs to the south, a widow who ran her own cattle operation with fierce independence. There were the Johnsons, a family with 6 children who lived about 10 miles east and who promised to bring fiddles for dancing at the wedding. There was Reverend Thomas, who rode a circuit between several communities and would perform the ceremony. As the wedding approached, Lydia found herself both excited and nervous. She was no longer the grieving woman who had stepped off the train in black. She had changed, grown stronger and more confident. The prairie had worked its magic on her, and so had Franklin's patient love. Martha helped her make a new dress for the wedding, a simple but elegant design in cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. It felt significant to leave behind the black dresses, to step into something new and bright. The night before the wedding, Lydia stood in her room, looking at herself in the small mirror. She thought about her father and wished desperately that he could be there to see her happy. But she also knew somehow that he would approve of Franklin, of this life she was building. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the September air crisp with the promise of autumn. They held the ceremony outside, with the prairie as their cathedral and the sky as their ceiling. Lydia wore wildflowers in her hair, picked that morning by the Johnson children. Franklin wore his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his eyes shining with love as he watched her approach. Reverend Thomas spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together through all the seasons that would come. When it was time for their vows, Franklin took Lydia's hands and spoke from his heart. "Lydia, you came into my life when I had almost given up hope of finding someone to share it with. You brought light and laughter back into this house. You made me believe in love again. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to honor your grief even as I celebrate your joy, to be your partner in all things. I love you with everything I am." Lydia felt tears on her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "Franklin, you gave me reasons to smile again when I thought I would never smile. You showed me that life could still be beautiful, even after loss. You have been patient and kind, and everything I did not know I needed. I promise to build this life with you, to work beside you, to love you through all the years we are given. You are my home." When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Franklin kissed her soundly, to the cheers and applause of their gathered friends and neighbors. The celebration that followed was joyous, with music and dancing and more food than Lydia had seen since leaving Philadelphia. She danced with Franklin, with Tom, with the Johnson boys who were all arms and legs and enthusiasm. She laughed until her sides hurt and felt thoroughly, completely happy. As the sun began to set and their guests began to depart, Franklin pulled Lydia close. "Ready to start our life together, Mrs. Hayes?" "I have been ready since the moment I said yes," Lydia replied. That night, in the home that was now truly theirs together, Franklin and Lydia consummated their marriage. He was gentle and patient, taking care to make sure she felt cherished and desired. Afterward, they lay together, her head on his chest, his fingers trailing through her hair. "I never knew it could be like this," Lydia whispered. "So right." "Neither did I," Franklin admitted, "but I am glad it is with you." Life as a married couple fell into a comfortable rhythm. Lydia took on more responsibilities around the ranch, and Franklin began to rely on her judgment more and more. When he was considering buying more cattle, she helped him run the numbers and pointed out that they might be better served expanding their horse operation instead. Franklin followed her advice, and by the following spring, they had acquired several quality mares and a fine stallion, beginning a horse breeding program that would become known throughout the territory. Lydia also began to make the house more of a home. She ordered curtains from a catalog, bright, cheerful fabrics that replaced the faded ones that had hung since Franklin's mother's time. She planted flowers around the porch and started a small herb garden for cooking. She wrote to acquaintances back east, maintaining those connections even as she built new ones in Dakota Territory. But the greatest joy came in late winter when Lydia realized she was carrying a child. She told Franklin one evening in February as they sat by the fire, the wind howling outside. "I am expecting," she said simply. "The baby should come in late summer." Franklin's face went through a series of emotions: shock, wonder, fierce joy, and finally a trace of fear. "Are you well? Do you need to see the doctor in town?" Lydia laughed at his sudden anxiety. "I am fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. But yes, we should probably have Dr. Morrison come check on me." Over the following months, as spring came to the prairie and Lydia's belly grew round with their child, Franklin was attentive to the point of being overprotective. He did not want her lifting anything heavy or working too hard. Lydia found it endearing even when it was frustrating, and Martha finally had to take him aside and explain that pregnant women were not made of glass. As summer approached, Lydia felt nervous about the birth. Martha had attended many births and would be there to help, and they planned to have Dr. Morrison come from town when her time was near. But Lydia could not help remembering that her own mother had died in childbirth, and she worried about leaving Franklin alone. One night in early August, when she was large and uncomfortable and could not sleep, Franklin found her on the porch looking at the stars. "Having worries?" he asked, settling beside her and taking her hand. "What if something happens to me?" Lydia asked quietly. "What if I leave you like my mother left my father?" Franklin was quiet for a moment, then said, "Then I would grieve you for the rest of my life, just as your father grieved your mother. But I would also celebrate every moment we had together and love our child with everything in me. However, I am not planning on losing you. You are too stubborn to let something like childbirth defeat you." Despite her fears, Lydia had to laugh. "You think I am stubborn?" "I know you are stubborn," Franklin said, grinning. "It is one of the things I love most about you. You faced down your grief and built a new life. You learned to ride and help run a ranch when you had never set foot outside a city before. You are the strongest person I know, and I believe in you." His faith in her gave Lydia courage. When labor started on a hot August night, she was scared but determined. Martha was there, calm and competent, and Dr. Morrison arrived in time to oversee the final stages. Franklin waited outside, pacing the porch like a caged animal, Tom keeping him company. When the baby's cry finally rang out, healthy and strong, Franklin burst through the door. Martha met him with a smile. "You have a son, a big, healthy boy, and Lydia is tired but doing well." Franklin rushed to the bedroom where Lydia lay exhausted but smiling, their son in her arms. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was already rooting around for food. "He is perfect," Franklin whispered, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed and looking at his son with wonder. "He is ours," Lydia said, looking up at her husband. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never quite settled on one. Now Franklin said, "What about Henry after your father, Henry Norton Hayes?" Fresh tears filled Lydia's eyes. "You would do that. Your father made you who you are," Franklin said simply. "I never got to meet him, but I am grateful to him every day for raising such an incredible woman. It would be an honor to name our son after him." Baby Henry was a good baby, healthy and growing strong. He had Lydia's dark hair and Franklin's gray eyes, and both parents were completely besotted with him. The house rang with his cries and gurgles, sounds that made it feel truly alive. As Henry grew from an infant into a chubby, cheerful baby, Lydia marveled at how her life had changed. 2 years ago, she had been a grieving woman in black, arriving in a strange land with no hope and no future. Now she was a wife and mother, a partner in a successful ranch, surrounded by friends and community. She had found more than just survival. She had found a real life, full of love and purpose. Franklin thrived as a father. He would walk the floor with Henry in the middle of the night, singing old cowboy songs in his rumbling voice. He took the baby out to the barn to see the horses and talked to him about the ranch as if Henry could understand every word. He was patient and gentle, never too busy or too tired to hold his son. One evening, when Henry was about 6 months old and sitting in his high chair gnawing on a wooden spoon, Lydia watched Franklin making funny faces at the baby, drawing out delighted giggles. She felt her heart swell with love for both of them. "You gave me my life back," she said suddenly. Franklin looked up, surprised. "What do you mean? When I came here, I was just existing, going through the motions. I thought I would spend the rest of my life in black dresses and maybe my heart would be in black too. But you showed me that I could still have joy, still have love. You gave me reasons to smile again, and now you have given me this beautiful family. I cannot imagine what my life would be if I had not gotten on that train." Franklin came to her and pulled her close, careful not to jostle the baby. "You did the hard work, Lydia. You chose to keep going even when it hurt. You chose to open your heart again. I just tried to be worthy of that choice." "You are more than worthy," Lydia said, tilting her face up for a kiss. "You are everything." As the years passed, the Hayes Ranch continued to prosper. Their horse breeding program became well known, and they began to attract buyers from as far away as Colorado and Montana. Franklin hired 2 more ranch hands to help with the expanded operation, young men who were good workers and respectful. They built a larger barn and expanded the house, adding a proper dining room and another bedroom. Lydia became pregnant again when Henry was 2, and this time she felt less fear and more excitement. Their second son, whom they named James after Franklin's father, was born in the spring during a thunderstorm. He was smaller than Henry had been but just as healthy, with light hair and a serious expression that made everyone laugh. With 2 young boys, the house was chaos and noise and constant activity. Lydia and Franklin took turns managing the children and the ranch work. Martha, who was growing older but refused to slow down, helped with the boys and declared them the grandchildren she had never had. When Henry was 4 and James was 2, Lydia found herself pregnant once more. This time, the baby was a girl, tiny and delicate with dark eyes and blonde curls. They named her Sarah after Franklin's mother, and she wrapped her father around her little finger from the moment she was born. Life was busy but full. The children grew like weeds, Henry serious and thoughtful, James mischievous and adventurous, Sarah sweet but stubborn. Franklin taught the boys to ride almost as soon as they could walk, and Sarah was determined not to be left behind, climbing onto a pony before her 3rd birthday. Lydia sometimes looked at her life and could hardly believe it was real. She taught the children their letters and numbers, just as her father had taught her. She managed the household and kept the books for the ranch, which now employed 5 full-time hands. She participated in the growing community of Bismarck, which was becoming a real city, helping to establish a school and a library. But through it all, the center of her life was Franklin. They had grown together, learned each other's rhythms and needs. They still took morning rides when they could, just the two of them watching the sunrise over the prairie. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, his arm around her shoulders, talking about their day and making plans for the future. One night, about 7 years after their wedding, they found themselves alone on the porch, all 3 children finally asleep after a particularly chaotic bedtime routine. Lydia leaned against Franklin's shoulder, feeling bone-tired but content. "You ever miss Philadelphia?" Franklin asked. Lydia considered the question. "Sometimes I miss certain things, the theater, the libraries, the shops, but no, I do not miss the life I had there. That was not really living. This is living." "No regrets then," Franklin pressed, "about answering that advertisement? About taking a chance on a cowboy you had never met?" Lydia turned to look at him, this man who had become her whole world. She saw the lines that had appeared at the corners of his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. She saw the gray starting to thread through his hair. She saw the face she loved more than any other. "My only regret is that I did not meet you sooner," she said honestly. "You took a grieving woman in black and gave her back her colors. You gave me love, a home, a family. You gave me every reason in the world to smile. How could I ever regret that?" Franklin kissed her, slow and sweet and full of promise. "I love you, Lydia Hayes, today, tomorrow, and for all the days after that. And I love you, Franklin Hayes, always." They sat together as the stars came out, listening to the sounds of the prairie night and the occasional cry from one of their children. Lydia thought about the woman she had been, stepping off that train in mourning clothes, certain that her life was over. She thought about how Franklin had been patient with her grief, had given her space to heal while also giving her reasons to hope. She thought about the family they had built together, the life they had created. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. When Henry turned 10, he began taking on more responsibilities around the ranch, shadowing his father and learning the business. James, at 8, was more interested in the horses, spending hours in the barn with the animals. Sarah, at 6, was developing into a fierce little person who had opinions about everything. Lydia watched her children grow and saw pieces of herself and Franklin in each of them. Henry had Franklin's steady nature and Lydia's head for figures. James had Franklin's way with animals and Lydia's stubborn determination. Sarah had a mix of both their temperaments, sweet one moment and fierce the next. The ranch continued to thrive. Their horses were now sought after throughout the territory and beyond. Franklin's reputation as a fair dealer and skilled rancher had spread, and he was often consulted by other ranchers on breeding and stock management. Lydia's business acumen had helped them weather several difficult financial periods, and they had managed to acquire additional land, expanding their holdings significantly. Martha and Tom grew older, eventually retiring from active ranch work, though they stayed in their cabin and remained part of the Hayes family. New hands came and went, but a core group stayed, becoming almost like family themselves. Bismarck continued to grow from a frontier town into a proper city. When Dakota Territory became a state in 1889, splitting into North and South Dakota, there were celebrations throughout Bismarck. The Hayes family attended, the children wide-eyed at the fireworks and festivities. Lydia felt a surge of pride in this place that had become her home, this state she had helped build in her own small way. By the time their 10th wedding anniversary arrived in 1892, Lydia and Franklin had created something truly special. The ranch was successful and well respected. Their children were healthy and happy. They had a community of friends and neighbors who supported each other through hard times and celebrated together during good times. For their anniversary, Franklin surprised Lydia with a trip to Denver, leaving the children with Martha and Tom. It was the farthest Lydia had traveled since coming to Dakota Territory, and she was excited to see a real city again. Denver was bustling and modern, with electric lights and telephones and all the marvels of the changing times. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants, and saw a play at a real theater. It was wonderful and exciting, but after 3 days, both of them were ready to go home. "I have become a countrywoman," Lydia laughed as they boarded the train back to Bismarck. "I miss the quiet and the space." "I miss the children," Franklin admitted. "And the ranch. Is that terrible? We finally get time alone and I want to go home." "Not terrible at all," Lydia assured him. "It means we have built a good life, one worth returning to." On the train ride home, Lydia reflected on the past decade. She thought about the frightened, grieving woman she had been, and the strong, confident woman she had become. She thought about how Franklin had been the catalyst for that change, but that she had done the hard work herself, choosing every day to keep living, keep loving, keep building. When they arrived home, the children rushed to greet them, talking over each other about everything that had happened in their absence. Henry had helped deliver a foal. James had fallen in the creek and Martha had had to fish him out. Sarah had learned to braid her own hair, though the results were lopsided and enthusiastic rather than neat. That night, with the children finally settled and the house quiet, Franklin and Lydia stood on the porch, looking out at the prairie bathed in moonlight. 10 years, Franklin said wonderingly. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you stepped off that train. Other times it feels like you have always been here." "I think maybe I was always meant to be here," Lydia replied. "Maybe everything that happened, all the pain and grief, was leading me to this place, to you, to this life." "You think your father would be proud?" Franklin asked gently. He knew she still thought of her father often, though the grief had softened into bittersweet remembrance. "I do," Lydia said with certainty. "He wanted me to be happy, to be loved and secure, and I am all of those things. I wish he could have met you, could have known his grandchildren. But I think somehow he knows, wherever he is, that I am all right, better than all right." Over the following years, the children grew into young adults. Henry became Franklin's right hand on the ranch, showing the same dedication and integrity his father had. At 19, he began courting Emma Richardson's daughter, Anna, a capable young woman who could ride and rope as well as any man. Franklin and Lydia were delighted with the match, seeing in the young couple echoes of their own relationship. James, at 17, announced his intention to train as a veterinarian. He wanted to attend school in St. Paul, Minnesota, and then return to the territory to practice. It was hard to let him go, but both Franklin and Lydia supported his dream. He left with their blessing and promises to write often. Sarah, at 15, was developing into a remarkable young woman. She had her mother's intelligence and her father's strength, and she had no interest in the conventional expectations for young ladies. She wanted to help run the ranch, and Franklin began teaching her everything he knew. Lydia, now in her mid-40s, sometimes looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. Her dark hair was threaded with silver, and there were lines around her eyes and mouth. But they were laugh lines, proof of a life well lived. Her hands were rough from work, but they were capable hands, hands that had built something real. Franklin, nearing 50, had gone mostly gray, but he was still strong and vital. He still woke before dawn to see to the horses. He still made Lydia laugh with his dry humor. He still looked at her with the same love and desire he had shown when they first married. One spring day, when the prairie was covered in wildflowers and the air was sweet with new growth, Lydia took one of her solitary rides. She ended up at the spot where Franklin had first told her he loved her, the rise overlooking the ranch and the endless prairie beyond. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain of losing her father, the terror of traveling alone to marry a stranger, the slow, patient building of trust and friendship, the blossoming of love, the joy of children and family, the satisfaction of work well done and a life well lived. "Thank you, Papa," she whispered to the wind. "Thank you for raising me to be strong, for teaching me that love is worth fighting for. I found my place just like you wanted. I found my home." As if in response, a meadowlark sang its bright, cheerful song, and Lydia smiled. She turned her horse toward home, toward Franklin and Sarah, who would be wondering where she had gone. Toward the ranch that she and Franklin had built together. Toward the life that had seemed impossible when she had stepped off that train in black. She had come to Dakota Territory in mourning, certain that joy was behind her. But Franklin Hayes, patient and kind and steadfast, had shown her otherwise. He had given her reasons to smile again, and in doing so, he had given her everything. The evening of that same day, as the family gathered for supper, Henry announced that he and Anna had decided to marry in the fall. The table erupted in excited congratulations, and plans immediately began to form. Martha, now quite elderly but still sharp as a tack, declared she would make the wedding cake. Sarah insisted she should be allowed to stand up with Anna, even though she was young for a bridesmaid. James sent a telegram from St. Paul saying he would be there no matter what. After supper, as had become their custom, Franklin and Lydia walked together in the cool evening air. They held hands, comfortable in their silence, needing no words after so many years together. "Our boy is getting married," Franklin said, a note of wonder in his voice. "When did he grow up?" "Sometime when we were not looking," Lydia replied with a smile. "He is a good man. You raised him well." "We raised him well," Franklin corrected. "You gave our children something I never could have alone. You gave them a mother's love and wisdom. You gave them stability and learning. You made our house a home." Lydia squeezed his hand. "We made it together. Everything we have, we built together." They walked to the creek, their special place, where the willow trees had grown tall and thick over the years. Franklin pulled Lydia close, and they swayed together to music only they could hear. "You remember our wedding?" Franklin asked. "You wore wildflowers in your hair." "I remember everything about that day," Lydia said. "I remember thinking I was the luckiest woman alive. I still think that." "I am the lucky one," Franklin insisted. "You took a chance on a lonely cowboy. You built this life with me. You gave me everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know I needed." "We gave each other everything," Lydia said. "That is what love is, I think. Not just receiving but giving, not just taking but building together." They stood there as darkness fell, wrapped in each other's arms, the sounds of the prairie night rising around them. Inside the house, they could hear Sarah singing and the warm glow of lamplight spilled from the windows. This was home, this was family, this was the life they had created together. Henry's wedding that fall was a joyous occasion. The whole community came to celebrate, and the ranch was filled with music and laughter. Anna was a beautiful bride, and Henry could not take his eyes off her. Watching them exchange vows, Lydia felt herself tear up, remembering her own wedding day and the promises she and Franklin had made. Franklin put his arm around her, pulling her close. "Memories," he asked quietly. "The best kind," Lydia replied. "I was just thinking about how far we have come, how much we have built." After the wedding, Henry and Anna moved into a small house Franklin had built for them on the property. They wanted to stay and help run the ranch, and Franklin was grateful for Henry's partnership. Together, father and son worked to continue expanding the operation, their relationship deepening into true partnership. When James returned from veterinary school 2 years later, he set up a practice in Bismarck but lived at the ranch, riding out to treat animals throughout the region. His skills were in high demand, and he quickly became known as the best animal doctor in the territory. Sarah, at 18, showed no signs of wanting to marry, much to the disappointment of several young men in the area. She was too busy helping run the ranch and learning everything she could about horse breeding. Franklin treated her as an equal partner, valuing her opinions and insights. One evening, as Franklin and Lydia were getting ready for bed, she said, "I never imagined my life would turn out like this." Franklin paused in unbuttoning his shirt. "Are you unhappy?" "No," Lydia said quickly. "The opposite. I am so happy it sometimes scares me. I keep thinking something will happen to take it all away." Franklin came to her, taking her face in his hands. "Life does not work that way, love. We do not lose happiness because we are too happy. We have earned this, you and I. We have worked hard, loved hard, built something real. We deserve to enjoy it without fear." "When did you become so wise?" Lydia asked, smiling up at him. "I learned from the best," Franklin replied, kissing her softly. "A woman who came here in mourning and taught me that grief and joy can exist together, that loss does not mean the end of love." They were in their early 50s now, and their love had deepened and matured like fine wine. The passion was still there, but it was tempered with understanding and companionship. They knew each other's thoughts before they were spoken, could communicate with a glance across a crowded room. They were truly partners in every sense of the word. As the 20th century dawned, bringing with it new technologies and changes, the Hayes Ranch adapted and thrived. They installed a telephone line, connecting them to the outside world in ways they never had been before. They purchased their first automobile, though Franklin insisted horses would always have a place on the ranch. They brought in electricity, which seemed like a miracle after years of oil lamps. Henry and Anna had their first child, a boy they named Franklin after his grandfather. Franklin Hayes the elder was utterly besotted with his grandson, spending hours with the baby, telling him stories and making plans for his future. "I want him to know this land," Franklin told Lydia as they watched baby Franklin sleep in his cradle. "I want him to understand that this place, this life, was built with love and hard work, that it is worth protecting and preserving." "He will know," Lydia assured him, "just as our children know. You have built something that will last beyond us, Franklin, a legacy of integrity and love." Martha passed away peacefully in her sleep one winter night, with Tom holding her hand. The entire community mourned her loss, and Lydia felt like she had lost a mother. But she took comfort in knowing that Martha had lived a full, happy life and had been surrounded by love until the end. Tom followed her 6 months later, dying of a broken heart according to Dr. Morrison, though officially it was heart failure. Franklin and Lydia buried them side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could forever watch over the place they had helped build. Their loss made Franklin and Lydia more aware of the passage of time, of the preciousness of every day. They made a conscious effort to slow down, to appreciate the small moments that made up a life. One warm summer evening, 20 years after their wedding, Franklin suggested they ride up to the rise to watch the sunset. They had not done it in years, too busy with the demands of the ranch and family. But now, with Henry and Anna managing much of the daily work, they had more freedom. They rode slowly, their horses ambling along familiar paths. When they reached the top, they dismounted and stood looking out over the vista that had become so familiar yet still took their breath away. "You remember the first time I brought you here?" Franklin asked. "The morning I realized I was falling in love with you," Lydia replied. "How could I forget?" Franklin put his arm around her waist. "I knew that morning that I was going to spend the rest of my life with you, that you were the one I had been waiting for." "I came here so broken," Lydia said softly, "so convinced that my life was over, and you patiently, carefully helped me put myself back together. You gave me reasons to smile, reasons to hope, reasons to love again." "You did that yourself," Franklin insisted. "I just had the privilege of watching and supporting you. Your strength, your resilience, your capacity to love even after loss, all of that came from you." "We healed each other," Lydia said. "That is what the best love does. It does not fix you, but it gives you a safe place to heal yourself." As the sun sank toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and purple, they stood together, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would last a lifetime. The years continued their steady march. More grandchildren arrived, Henry and Anna having 3 children in total. James eventually married a schoolteacher from Bismarck, a quiet, intelligent woman named Caroline, and they had 2 daughters. Sarah, to everyone's surprise, fell in love with a neighboring rancher's son and married at 25, building her own house on the far edge of the Hayes property. Franklin and Lydia became the patriarch and matriarch of a sprawling family, their home the center around which everyone orbited. Sunday dinners became a tradition, with all the children and grandchildren gathering for food and laughter and stories. Lydia loved these gatherings, loved seeing her children happy and her grandchildren thriving. But her favorite times were still the quiet moments with Franklin, early morning coffee on the porch or evening walks by the creek. These were the times when they could just be Lydia and Franklin, not parents or grandparents or ranch owners, just 2 people who had chosen each other and built a beautiful life together. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the family threw them a grand celebration. The whole community came, friends and neighbors from miles around. There was music and dancing and enough food to feed an army. Speeches were made, toasting the couple who had become pillars of the community. When Franklin stood to speak, the crowd quieted. He was now in his early 60s, his hair completely white, his face lined with age, but his eyes were still clear and his voice still strong. 25 years ago, he began, I placed an advertisement for a wife. I thought I was looking for someone practical, someone to help run a ranch and provide companionship. What I got was so much more than I could have imagined. He turned to look at Lydia, his expression full of love. Lydia came here carrying grief, but she was also carrying hope. She taught me that strength is not the absence of pain, but the courage to keep going despite it. She took a lonely ranch and made it a home. She took a solitary man and made him part of something greater. Every good thing in my life, every moment of joy, every success, can be traced back to the day she stepped off that train in Bismarck. The crowd applauded, but Franklin held up his hand. I know people look at us and think we have a perfect life, but it has not always been easy. We have had hard winters that killed cattle, dry summers that tested our faith, sicknesses and setbacks and moments of doubt. But through it all, we had each other. That has made all the difference. He raised his glass. To Lydia, the love of my life, my partner, my best friend. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy. Thank you for giving me 25 years of happiness. Here is to 25 more. Lydia stood and went to him, kissing him soundly to the cheers of their family and friends. I would do it all again, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, I would choose you every single time. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, they sat on the porch in their familiar spots, Lydia's head on Franklin's shoulder. We did good, did we not? Franklin said quietly. We did more than good, Lydia replied. We did extraordinary. We took two broken people and made them whole. We built a family, a legacy, a life worth living. I love you, Lydia Hayes, Franklin said, as he had said countless times over the years, but it never got old, never became routine. Each time felt as meaningful as the first. And I love you, Franklin Hayes, Lydia replied. Today, tomorrow, and for all the days after that. They sat together under the stars, content in the life they had built, grateful for every moment they had been given. The woman in mourning clothes who had arrived in Bismarck all those years ago was gone, replaced by a woman who knew joy, who had found love, who had learned to smile again. And the cowboy who had given her those reasons to smile had found his own redemption in loving her. Together, they had created something beautiful, something lasting, something true. As the years rolled on into their 60s and 70s, Franklin and Lydia remained active and engaged with the ranch, though they left more of the day-to-day operations to Henry and the younger generation. They spent their time with grandchildren, took long rides across the prairie they both loved, and enjoyed the peace that came with a life well lived. Their love story became legendary in the community, a testament to the power of second chances and the healing nature of true love. Young couples would ask them for advice, and Franklin and Lydia would always say the same thing. Choose each other every day, work together as partners, and never underestimate the power of patience and kindness. When Franklin passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Lydia grieved deeply. But it was a different kind of grief than she had experienced when her father died. This was not the desperate, drowning grief of someone who had lost everything. This was the bittersweet sorrow of someone who had loved fully and been loved completely in return. She knew Franklin would not want her to spend her remaining years in black, withdrawn from life. So she continued to live, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She continued to ride, though slower now, up to the rise where Franklin had first told her he loved her. She would sit there and talk to him, telling him about the family, about the ranch, about life. And she would remember the scared woman in mourning clothes stepping off a train. Remember the patient cowboy who had given her space to grieve and reasons to hope. Remember the love that had grown between them, steady and true and strong enough to build a life on. Lydia lived to be 82, active and sharp until the very end. When her time came, she went peacefully, surrounded by family, her last words a whisper. I am coming, Franklin. Wait for me. They buried her next to Franklin on the hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the legacy they had built together. At the funeral, their grandson Franklin, now a grown man running the ranch, spoke about his grandparents. They showed us what love really is, he said. Not just passion or romance, though they had plenty of that. But partnership, respect, working together to build something greater than yourselves. They taught us that grief and joy can coexist, that loss does not mean the end, that there are always reasons to smile if you look for them. The Hayes Ranch continued to thrive, passed down through generations, each one understanding that they were stewards of something precious. The story of Lydia and Franklin became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren, a reminder of where they came from and what really mattered. And if sometimes, on quiet mornings when the sun was just rising over the prairie, ranch hands would swear they saw two figures on horseback riding toward the rise, well, no one questioned it. Some love stories are too strong to be contained by something as simple as death. Lydia Norton had come to Dakota Territory in mourning, convinced her life was over. Franklin Hayes had shown her otherwise. Together, they had built not just a ranch or a family, but a testament to the healing power of love, the strength of partnership, and the truth that it is never too late for a new beginning. Their story was one of second chances and patient kindness, of a cowboy who gave a grieving woman reasons to smile again, and a woman who brought joy and purpose to a lonely man's life. It was a love story for the ages, played out against the backdrop of the American frontier, proving that the greatest adventures are not found in conquering land or amassing wealth, but in the quiet, daily choice to love and be loved in return.